My husband secretly transferred our joint savings to his account, so I drained mine first. Now he's furious and demanding I return the money, but I think he's just mad his plan backfired. I, 40F, have been married to my husband, Elias, 42M, for 12 years. For most of our marriage, we've kept our finances mostly separate, except for a joint savings account where we put money aside for big purchases, things like home renovations, vacations, or emergencies. It wasn't an account we touched often, but it was there as a safety net. Elias and I have had a solid relationship, or so I thought. We don't fight over money, and we make about the same amount. We've always had a what's mine is yours attitude, and I never had a reason to think he'd betray me financially. That changed about a month ago. I noticed Elias acting weird about money. He started making offhand comments about me, spending too much, which caught me off guard because I've never been reckless. If anything, I'm a more financially responsible one. I budget, track expenses, and make sure we don't overspend. Meanwhile, Elias has always been a little more relaxed, but he wasn't irresponsible, at least not before. Then there was this one evening when we were out to dinner with friends. The bill came, and Elias hesitated before pulling out his card, something he never does. I glanced at him, confused, and he just muttered, "Things are tight this month." That was the first red flag. I let it go at the time, but then I started noticing little things. He'd check his phone and immediately put it away when I walked by. He suddenly had a new password on his laptop. He stopped mentioning finances at all, which was weird because we'd always had an open book policy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I did something I had never done before. I checked our joint savings account. I still remember that sinking feeling in my stomach when I saw the balance. It was almost empty. Tens of thousands of dollars, money we had built up over years, was just gone. My first thought was fraud. I scrolled through the transactions, expecting to see something suspicious, but every transfer was perfectly legitimate. Elias had transferred the money out himself. At first, I thought maybe he had moved it for a good reason, so I waited until that evening to ask him. I wasn't even angry yet, just confused. I casually mentioned that I had checked the savings account, and I watched as he immediately tensed up. "Oh," he said, barely looking at me. "Yeah, I meant to tell you about that." I stared at him. "Okay, so tell me now." He sighed, like I was bothering him, and then he finally admitted he moved the money. His excuse? He was reorganizing our finances. I asked why he put it all on his personal account instead of ours, and he just waved a hand and said it was temporary. He claimed he was going to put it back once he figured things out. That was the moment I knew he was lying. Elias is many things, but he's not good at covering up when he's caught in a lie. He got defensive immediately, saying I was overreacting and that it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. I asked him point blank why he hadn't told me. If it was so innocent, why do it in secret? His response? "Because I knew you'd make a big deal out of it." I felt something shift in that moment. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was intentional. I didn't let him see how rattled I was, but inside, I was furious. He had taken our shared savings, the money we had both contributed to, and put it in his personal account, without even mentioning it. And now, he was acting like I was the problem for being upset. I knew I had to be careful. If he was willing to take the money behind my back, what else was he planning? That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, running through every possibility. Was he planning to leave? Was he hiding something? Did he have debts I didn't know about? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. He had no intention of putting that money back. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him again. Not yet. Instead, I was going to beat him at his own game. The next morning, while Elias was at work, I did what I had to do. I went to the bank, checked my personal account, where I kept my own savings, and transferred every last penny into a new account he didn't know about. I left just enough behind so it wouldn't look suspicious. Then I waited, and sure enough, a week later, the storm hit. Elias came home, slamming the door harder than usual. I was in the kitchen, pretending to be oblivious, when he walked in and tossed his phone onto the counter. "What did you do?" His voice was low and controlled, but I could hear the anger bubbling underneath. I blinked at him. "What are you talking about?" He let out a sharp laugh. running a hand through his hair. Don't play dumb, Eloan. You drained your savings. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you mean my personal savings? You mean like how you emptied our joint account without telling me? His jaw clenched. That was different. Ow! Elias didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, his face a mix of frustration and panic. Because I needed that money, he finally snapped. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Oh, and what exactly did you need it for? Silence. I waited. Finally, he exhaled sharply and shook his head. It's complicated. Try me. Elias looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something else flicker in his eyes. Not just frustration, fear. And that's when I knew. Whatever he had done with that money, it was bad. To be honest, I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I transferred the money. Part of me thought Elias would just admit he was wrong, apologize, and move on. Maybe he'd try to explain why he did it, and we'd have a big talk about trust and communication. But as I stood there in the kitchen, staring at him, all I could see was someone who was scrambling to cover his tracks. I could feel my pulse quickening as Elias avoided my eyes, fidgeting with his shirt sleeves. He was uncomfortable, and I wasn't used to seeing him like this. Normally, he was confident, too confident, really. But now, I could tell that something was deeply wrong. So, Elias, I started slowly. What exactly is so complicated? I let the silence stretch out between us, my gaze never leaving him. Is it a debt? Are you in trouble with someone? His lips parted, but nothing came out. I could tell he was weighing his options, deciding whether he was going to be honest or just keep lying. For a moment, I thought he might shut down completely and not say a word. But finally, his shoulders slumped, and he let out a breath. It's nothing like that, he said, running a hand through his hair again. His tone was different now, like he was trying to convince both me and himself. It's just, I didn't want you to find out this way. I didn't think it'd get this far. Get what far? I asked, narrowing my eyes. I felt like I was being pulled in two directions. Part of me wanted to hear him out, give him a chance to explain himself. But another part of me was furious that he kept dancing around the truth. I was planning to invest it, he finally admitted, his voice dropping lower, in something that could pay off. Big time. My heart skipped a beat. Invest? With our money? Without telling me. He nodded, his eyes darting toward the floor. I didn't want you to think it was a bad idea. I mean, I thought it was a good opportunity, but I wasn't sure you'd agree. I didn't want to risk you pulling out and stopping me from doing it. You didn't want me to stop you? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. So, you just decided to take our savings and put it into something risky without even asking me. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but I could see his words weren't coming out right. It was like he knew he couldn't justify it, but he still had to try. I didn't want to involve you until I was sure it was going to work out. It's a business opportunity. I thought I'd make a huge return, and then we'd be set for life. That's insane, I said, shaking my head. You think I'd be okay with you risking all of our savings on a whim? Without discussing it with me first. That's not how I meant it to be. He snapped, his temper flaring. It wasn't a whim. It's a calculated risk. I thought I could make us some serious money, Eloan. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had so many questions, but the more I listened to him, the less it made sense. How had he thought this was a good idea? Why did he feel the need to keep it all from me? And why the hell was he getting so defensive now? I'm not asking you to get involved in the details, Eloan, Elias said, his voice softer now, as if he was trying to coax me into understanding. I just needed the capital to make it happen. And I thought, if I could pull it off, we'd be better off than we've ever been. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd always thought we were partners, equal partners, when it came to our finances. But right then, it felt like I'd been cut out of the equation entirely. He hadn't trusted me with the decision, with the future of our financial security. Instead, he took matters into his own hands and tried to play me like I was some outsider in my own marriage. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. So, you just thought you'd take the money and make a decision that impacts both of us, without even considering what I might think about it? I didn't think it would be a problem, Elias said, his voice tinged with frustration. I just needed time to make it work. You had no problem taking it, though, I shot back. It wasn't about time. It was about control. You wanted to control the situation and keep me in the dark. Why didn't you trust me with this? Elias looked like he was about to say something, but then his expression faltered. I, I don't know, he admitted, sounding defeated. I guess I was scared you'd say no. I crossed my arms, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. And now you're scared I'm going to say no to the fact that you just drained our joint account, lied to me, and treated me like I wasn't even part of this? Is that it, Elias? He stayed silent, avoiding my eyes now, looking around the room like he didn't know where to focus. It was almost as if he was trying to process everything in real time, but nothing was clicking for him. Finally, I spoke again, calmer this time, but with the edge of someone who knew they'd been wronged. You made a huge mistake, Elias. And now you have two options. You can come clean about what you've done with the money, or you can keep pretending like this is just some misunderstanding. His eyes flickered up to meet mine. I could see the fear in them now, and it made my stomach turn. He knew he was in deep. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. I stood there for a while, just looking at Elias. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but he wasn't getting any closer to a solution. He was still trying to figure out how to handle the situation, and it was obvious that he was as clueless as I was about what to do next. I don't even know where to start, he said quietly, rubbing his hands over his face. I thought I could handle this on my own. I didn't want to burden you with it, but now I've made everything worse. I let out a slow breath, trying to calm myself. Elias, you didn't burden me. You excluded me. You took the money without even considering how it might affect us. I don't even know who you are right now. He looked up at me, his face a mixture of regret and guilt. I know I messed up, but I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being smart, investing it somewhere that would pay off big. You always said I could do better, that I needed to take more risks. I didn't answer right away. I needed to process everything he was saying, but it felt like none of it made sense. Was he trying to justify this? Or was he just talking to fill the silence? Either way, I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about taking risks. This was about taking control. You don't get it, I said, more sharply than I intended. This wasn't a risk. This was deceit. You didn't trust me enough to include me in the decision, and now we're in this mess. It's not about the money. It's about how you handled it. Elias seemed to shrink a little under my words. He looked guilty, but still stubborn. You wouldn't understand the opportunity. It wasn't just about the money. I want to make sure we had something secure, something bigger than what we've got now. I shook my head. No, Elias. You took our savings, our future, and turned it into some kind of gamble without even discussing it. That's not about security. That's about you trying to control everything. For a moment, there was silence again. Then, in a quieter voice, he asked, "So what now? What do you want me to do?" I crossed my arms, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. I want you to be honest with me. I want to know what you did with the money, where it went, and why you thought you could just hide it from me. And then, we need to figure out how to fix this. Together. Elias ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know what to say anymore. I didn't respond right away. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't like I could just forgive him and move on. There was a lot more than just money at stake here. But the worst part was that he didn't seem to fully realize the gravity of what he'd done. Not just with the money, but with the trust. The silence stretched on as I tried to gather my thoughts. Part of me wanted to demand answers, to shout at him for putting us in this situation, but I knew that wouldn't help. I needed him to see how serious this was, to take responsibility for his actions. I turned away from him for a moment, my mind racing. I kept thinking about that savings account, about how much we had both worked for, and how easily he'd taken it all without a second thought. I don't even know how to begin fixing this, I said, my voice quieter now. You've put us in a position where I can't trust you. I thought I knew you, Elias. I thought we were on the same team. Elias didn't answer at first. Then he took a deep breath, like he was finally starting to realize how much this was going to cost him. I'm sorry. I messed up. I should have talked to you. I should have trusted you. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Sorry doesn't fix this, Elias. We need to be able to trust each other, especially when it comes to something as serious as our finances. This isn't just about the money. It's about you taking something so important without even talking to me about it. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. He knew he had crossed a line, but I wasn't sure if he was capable of truly understanding how deep that line went. "I know you're right," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I don't know why I thought I could do it without telling you. I just, I thought I had to make a decision fast. I didn't think it would turn into this." I didn't know how to respond. Everything in me wanted to yell, to demand answers for all the months of silence, the lies, and the broken trust. But instead, I just stood there, feeling completely drained. "We'll figure this out," Elias said after a long pause. "I'll make it right. I'll fix it alone. I promise." It wasn't the apology I wanted, and it wasn't the answer I needed. But it was all he was offering, and I didn't know if I could trust it. "I don't know if you can," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if you can fix this." The air in the room felt thick, heavy, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to break. I wasn't sure where we were headed from here. I didn't know if there was a way back from what he'd done, or if he even understood the full impact of it. As the days passed, things didn't get better between Elias and me. In fact, they got worse. The trust that had been slowly eroding between us after his big mistake was almost completely gone. Even though he promised to fix everything, nothing really changed. He kept telling me he was working on a way to get the money back, but it never seemed like he was making any real progress. He was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. I, on the other hand, was furious. Every time I looked at him, all I could think about was how he had taken our savings, without even bothering to consult me, all for a risky investment that he had convinced himself would work. It didn't matter how many times he apologized or how many promises he made about fixing it. He had broken something that, honestly, felt irreparable. I began pulling away emotionally. I didn't want to hear his excuses anymore, and I didn't want him touching any of the accounts we still shared. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I needed to do something that would make him realize the weight of his actions. So, without consulting him, I drained my personal savings account. I took out every cent that was left in there, making sure there was nothing left to touch. If he thought he could take our joint savings and use them to gamble on some business venture, I'd show him what it felt like to lose something important. When Elias came home later that day, his face fell when he saw the empty accounts. "Eloan, what did you do?" he asked, his voice rising in anger. "You wanted to take my money without telling me? Fine, now you got nothing. You're not the only one who can make a decision unilaterally," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. Inside, though, I was shaking. I knew this wasn't going to end well, but I felt like I needed to make him understand. Elias stared at me, stunned. "Are you serious? You took all of it? You don't even care that I'm trying to fix things?" I looked at him, trying to stay calm. "You took our savings without consulting me. I'm just doing the same thing you did. You want to control, Elias. Well, now you've lost it." His face twisted with frustration. "This is different, Eloan. You just made everything worse. You think this is going to teach me a lesson? It's just going to make things harder." I didn't know how to respond to that. Maybe it was making things harder. But maybe that's exactly what he needed to understand the full consequences of his actions. I had to show him that I wasn't just some person he could ignore. I was his partner, and I wasn't going to sit around while he took everything from me. So, here's where we are right now. Elias has been making some effort to fix things, but honestly, nothing feels like it's getting back to normal. He's been telling me he's working on recovering the money, but the fact that I still haven't seen a dime back from the original investment he made makes me lose faith in his promises. It's been weeks, and every time he talks about progress, it just feels like more empty words. We're still living together, but things are awkward to say the least. I've been pulling back emotionally. I can't just forget that he violated my trust by taking our savings without discussing it with me. And the fact that he didn't see why that was a huge problem still stings. We don't really talk about the situation anymore, but it's hanging over us like a cloud. It's like we're both trying to move forward, but neither of us is really dealing with what happened. As for the money I took out of my account, it was probably the one thing I did that did make me second guess myself. I don't know if it helped or just added to the mess. Elias was furious when he found out. He accused me of making everything harder and said I just made him feel like I didn't trust him. I get that he's hurt, but I feel like that's exactly how I've been feeling for a while, too. Maybe he wasn't expecting me to fight back this way, but I wanted him to understand what it feels like to have everything taken without your consent. So here's where I'm stuck. I'm not sure if I went too far with my response. He clearly messed up by taking the money without consulting me, but was taking my savings too drastic? Maybe it made things worse, but at the time, I felt like I needed to show him the weight of his actions. I'm questioning if there's a way forward for us, or if this is something that's permanently damaged our relationship. Reddit, am I the a-hole for what I did? Should I have handled this differently, or was my reaction justified? I really need your honest opinions because I'm at a crossroads right now, and I don't know what to do next. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more stories like this, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments.